Welcome to Learn English with Dr. Bruce, and I'm Dr. Bruce. And what are we doing today? Today we're going to talk about foreign words in English. Yeah, they're called loan words, and we're going to be talking about those. So English is a global language. It's used in business, education, technology, travel, etc. And, well, it's probably why you want to learn English. There are about 600,000 words in the English language that are defined in the Oxford Dictionary. It's generally accepted if you know between 250 and 500 words that you're a beginner. If you know between 1,000 and 3,000, you're intermediate level, and if you're up around 10,000, you're an expert. You're speaking like a native, although I know a lot of natives who don't have anywhere near 10,000 words in their vocabulary. So numbers itself, yeah, not that important. This is just a general ballpark figure, as we say. Words in English have a number of different meanings, and if you read, for example, a newspaper article, you may find 5 or 6 new words that you've never heard of before. You may see some words that you think you knew the definition of, but it doesn't quite fit in with the sentence. And so, as I always say, context is key. Context can give away the meaning of the word. Today, however, the words that we're going to be looking at, these loan words, yeah, context doesn't make any difference, really. You need to know what the word is and what its definition is. So you're studying English. You're learning new vocabulary. Have you ever thought about where these words come from that you see in English? Maybe, maybe not. Well, today we're going to be looking at these loan words, and loan words are foreign words that are used in the English language pretty much as they are. They're not really changed, and so sometimes it's a word, sometimes it's a phrase. There are some very common ones that you will find especially in reading. So, for example, if you're reading articles in CNN website or the BBC website, or you're listening to a TED Talk and reading the script, you're going to hear some of these words. If you're in an academic setting, you may hear these words in daily conversation, not just in writing, but people using them in speaking. So we're going to go over 20 common loan words today. And I'm going to talk about where they come from, what language they come from. I'm going to talk about their meaning, and then I'm going to give them in a sentence. If you really want to move your vocabulary to another level, you need to know the loan words, their meanings, and how to use them in a sentence. And so, let's hit it. First word, curriculum vitae. Curriculum vitae. Curriculum vitae comes from Latin, and it's a summary of your work and your education and your experience. In America, we usually call it a resume. And curriculum vitae is not always used when a curriculum vitae is being discussed. A lot of times it's just called a CV. CV? Easy, huh? So you knew a loan word, you didn't even know it was a loan word. Well, maybe. And what about an example of curriculum vitae? Will you please send my curriculum vitae to your HR department? Loan word number 2, deja vu. Deja vu is a French word, and it means the experience of imagining that a particular situation has occurred before. It's a feeling that you've already experienced something that's actually happening for the first time. And I think we've all probably had feelings of deja vu. I have a lot of them, and I think the older I get, the more I have. What's an example of deja vu? I entered the room and immediately felt a sense of deja vu. It means that I felt like I had been in this room before, even though I had never been there. It just seemed very familiar to me. Loan word number 3, versus. Versus is a Latin word, and it means being in opposition to or against. Not too difficult, and you see versus all the time. What's an example? The Cardinals versus the Cubs is a game that I've waited a long time to see. I'm a Cardinal fan, and the Cubs are traditional rivals. Loan word number 4, en route. En route is a French word, and it means en route to someplace. You're going someplace. An example? I stopped in Bangkok en route to Lahore. Loan word number 5, per capita. Per capita is another Latin word, and it means per person. An example? Do you know Indonesia's GDP, gross domestic product, per capita? Well, I happen to know what it is, and last year It was approximately 4,300 US dollars. Loan word number 6, faux pas. Faux pas is a French word, and it means a socially awkward or tactless act. It's an embarrassing remark or act in a social situation. We've probably all been there. I've made many faux pas in my life. An example, I realized that I had committed a faux pas when I asked him about his family problems. Should not have gotten so personal. Number 7, back to Latin words again, status quo. So status quo means the existing state of affairs, things as they are now. An example, he said, I'm old and conservative and I want to keep the status quo. He's not interested in any changes. He likes things just as they are, the status quo. Loan word number 8, and here is a meaning for this word that I didn't know. So doesn't make any difference if you're highly educated, if you're a native speaker, there's always new things to learn about language. Vis-à-vis. Vis-à-vis is a French word that means face-to-face. I didn't know that. I knew that literally it meant face-to-face, or it means in relation to, in regard to, and that's the way that I've always used vis-à-vis. An example, I've read his comments vis-à-vis the role of the media in international conflicts. That's how I use it. Loan word number 9, back to Latin again, bona fide. It's a Latin word which means undertaken in good faith or real or genuine. An example, his latest record was a bona fide hit. Means it was a real hit. His latest novel was a bona fide bestseller. Boy, I wish I had a bestseller. Loan word number 10, par excellence. Par excellence is a French word, not pronounced in the American way that I'm pronouncing it, and it means an example of excellence, being the best of something of the kind. An example, he is a teacher par excellence. I've had a few. Number 11, we're jumping to another country here for this loan word, and this is one of my favorite words, zeitgeist. Zeitgeist comes from German, and it's the general intellectual, moral, and cultural climate of an era. The thought or sensibility characteristic of a particular era of time. And I first heard this word when I was a teenager reading a comic book. It was a kind of an intellectual comic book. There were a few back in those days. What's an example? Andy Warhol's paintings perfectly captured the zeitgeist of the 1960s in America. While we're on German, let's use another German word, schadenfreude. Schadenfreude is pleasure at someone else's misfortune. I've felt this way, and maybe you have too. So, and what's an example of that? I was overwhelmed with schadenfreude when my rival suffered a humiliating loss in the final. I was taking pleasure in their misfortune. And let's stick with German again, the doppelganger. Doppelganger is a double, sometimes a ghostly double, a look-alike or a clone of a person. And you hear this a lot in science fiction and in horror movies. An example, I was filled with dread when I dreamed I met my doppelganger. And sometimes look-alikes are hired by clubs or parties to entertain people. They learn to sing like their doppelganger, for example, Elvis impersonators. And the crowd, well, they may think that they're getting almost the real thing. Number 14, let's get back to the Latin, quid pro quo. Quid pro quo means something for something, an equal exchange. So this is used in English kind of like, I'll scratch your back if you scratch mine. Or maybe, what's in it for me? I'm going to give you something and I want something back. How about an example in a sentence? When negotiating with my boss, I always do it on a quid pro quo basis. I give him something, he gives me something. And some more Latin, pro bono. Pro bono is done or donated without charge. It's something free. Something for the public good, for example. My lawyer does a lot of pro bono work for clients that cannot pay for her service because she's a good lawyer and a fine person, and so she donates her time and her expertise for people that have problems but are not able to pay for it. She does a lot of pro bono work. Some more Latin, sine qua non. Sine qua non means without which not. Without which not. Well, that's kind of hard to figure out. Let's say that it's something indispensable. It's an indispensable element or condition. Maybe an example will help clear this one up. This is a tricky one. Patience is a sine qua non for a good teacher. Means you can't be a good teacher if you don't have patience. And some more Latin. Number 17, post-mortem. Post-mortem, examination of a body after death, an autopsy. If you're a fan of crime shows, I'm sure you've heard post-mortem many, many times. Example in a sentence, the police asked the coroner to carry out a post-mortem on the suspected murder victim. Number 18, Latin again, postpartum, after childbirth. Some women suffer from postpartum depression. Unfortunately, that's true. Number 19, Latin once again. There are a lot of Latin loan words in English. Persona non grata, unacceptable or unwelcome person. I became persona non grata after I was caught taking bribes while in office. Now, sometimes you use an article in front of this, but usually not. So you could say I became a persona non grata, but usually we just say I became persona non grata after I was caught taking a bribe while in office. And the last loan word for today, Latin, once again, ad hoc. Ad hoc is a very, very common word to see in English. Ad hoc is a Latin phrase meaning literally to this. In English, typically signifies a solution for a specific problem or a task, rather than a generalized solution. And ad hoc can be used as an adjective or an adverb. After the fire destroyed the school building, a committee was formed ad hoc. We formed an ad hoc committee to raise funds for our neighbor after his house burned down. These are the common foreign words which we use in our daily conversation. Now, I talk a lot about situational learning for vocabulary. In this case, situational learning does not really apply. And there's not only one way to learn English, to learn anything. There are a number of different ways. And so in this case, how do I learn these kind of words in other languages, loan words in other languages? I see it. I write it down in a notebook, I write a sentence, I write another sentence, I write another sentence, sentences that have some meaning for me so that I'll remember them. And then I come back and I look at them every day for a week or so, and I try to use them in conversations with people. Sometimes I make a mistake and people will tell me, and that's okay because making mistakes is how we learn. Don't be afraid to make mistakes in English. And there are many, many more loan words, and we're going to talk about them in other videos because I've seen videos where people say, here's 100 loan words, or here's 50 loan words. There's just so many. Wow, it's just overwhelming. I like to keep mine down to 20 or 30 maximum, and I'm getting more and more to the place where I like 20 instead of 30 because 20, you can come back and you can look at this again. So come back and look at this again. And just one more thing about learning loan words. If you come across one, let's say in the CNN website, you're reading it and you see a word that you don't understand, you put your cursor over it and bingo, definition pops up. Okay, that will help right there, but you don't want to do that all the time because, well, it interrupts the flow of your reading, the flow of your thinking. And so these are ones where it is good to memorize them. I'm against memorizing list of vocabularies generally, and here as well. I don't want you to sit here and try to do 20 of these words in the order that I've got them and try to memorize them. Pick the ones that you think are most relevant. Look at those first. Come back to the other ones and learn those. Remember, learning language is a long, long process. I'm 73 years old. I'm still learning about English every day. And Indonesian, I learn new things in Indonesia every day too. So Despite what you may see on some websites, you are not going to become fluent in 30 days. Sorry, just not going to happen. I hate to give you the bad news, but that's it. Don't get depressed by that. Learning is a process. Learning language is a process. It should be a fun thing. So if you stay consistent, you know I always talk about consistency. If you stay consistent, you will learn. You will progress. And we'll come back in another video somewhere along the line and talk about another 20 loan words in English. And that is it for today. Thanks for viewing. Be kind to someone today. Stay safe, and I will see you next time. Keep on learning.